How do we keep the faith alive when we are unable to receive the sacraments? Maybe you're in a place right now like I am where masses are canceled, and because of gathering restrictions, we are not able to meet to pray together. Welcome to All That Catholic Stuff. I'm Chris Bray. Listen, I want everyone to hear this. If we feel that our faith is doomed or we are lost because the sacraments are out of our reach, then perhaps our faith is not in God's grace.
I've got the joy. I've got the joy. Yes. Oh, I've got the joy in my heart to stay.
What do we do in this time when the sacraments are unavailable to us? There are many thoughts and opinions on churches being closed. And I'm not talking about whether that's the right choice or not, but the reality is that for a lot of people, that is the present circumstance right now. Yes, it's unfortunate, but it is our current reality. So the question is, how do we keep our faith alive when these sacraments are unavailable to us? Maybe we feel like we're lost without them. Christ instituted the sacraments as outward signs to give us his grace. Like the Eucharist, for example, is referred to as the sacrament of salvation because it is Jesus himself that we are receiving. Receiving the sacraments is the normative and ideal means for us to receive God's grace. I think a lot of people who are devout Catholics or even people who are on the fringe are asking themselves the question right now because the sacraments are unavailable to them is how do we live out our faith? What does this look like when I can't go to Mass? How do I keep my faith life alive? Is it possible or are we lost? I think this is actually an opportunity for us to work on three things: intentionality, desire, and fervor. Like this is actually nothing new. Maybe for us in North America, this is something new, not being able to receive the sacraments on demand whenever we want. But all across the world, present day, and across the ages, this is not a new dilemma. There have been long durations where Christians were unable to receive the Eucharist, and yet were still able to live out their faith with intentionality, desire, and fervor. In Japan, for example, tens of thousands of Christians gathered for 250 years without a priest or being able to celebrate the Mass. They would gather together in secret, and all that they had to go on was the distant memory of a grandmother's grandmother who happened to be at a Mass one time, and yet their faith had intentionality, desire, and fervor. It wasn't until missionary priests were allowed back in the country that they found 10,000 Catholic Christians waiting for them, who had never celebrated the Mass, who had never seen a priest before. Their faith didn't stop just because Mass was canceled. It sort of puts our lives into perspective, doesn't it? We feel like we have a permission slip to be lazy because Mass is canceled, that we don't need to pray or we don't need to read the scriptures, that we don't need to ask and help those who are in need. When we compare our lives to those Christians that lived for 250 years without even having met a priest, we really have no excuse. A similar scenario happened in Korea in the 19th century where a servant of God missionary preached the gospel in 1784. The church was run completely by lay people until decades later when missionary priests returned to find 4,000 people, Christians, waiting for them, and only one of which had ever met a priest. Another great example is St. Mark in the 19th century. He was an opium addict. And because he was addicted to drugs, his confessor excluded him from the sacraments for 30 years of his life. And yet, he had the desire, intentionality, and fervor to live a holy life to the best of his ability and by God's grace, which actually led him to be put to death as a martyr for his faith. Somehow, these Christians had the grace to devote their life to Christ even when Mass was canceled. I'm sure there's somebody out there saying it, but yeah, these are exceptions. And you're absolutely right. But these are exceptional times that we are living in right now. And God is giving us the grace to live holy, virtuous lives. The sacraments are a gift to the church, and it is the normative and ideal means for us to receive God's grace. But here's the thing, is that though we are bound by the sacraments, God is not. God is not bound by the sacraments. He can work outside of the sacraments to give us the grace that we need in these moments where we desire him. In these moments when we want to seek after him with intentionality and fervor. God can work in us if we truly seek after him. Listen, I want everyone to hear this. If we feel that our faith is doomed or we are lost because the sacraments are out of our reach, then perhaps our faith is not in God's grace. Perhaps we're putting too much of our faith in our own selves and in our own strength. And that's called superstition. That's actually a 4th century heresy known as Pelagianism, because we do not have the power and ability in and of ourselves to reach perfection, to strive for the holiness that we are called to. That requires God's grace. And here's the beauty of our faith, is that though we are bound by the sacraments, God is not. He's demonstrated this time and time again with the Christians and the martyrs and the saints across history who went long durations without being able to receive the Eucharist, without being able to receive the sacraments, and yet somehow they were able to live holy lives by God's grace. Maybe this is an opportunity to appreciate how good we've had it for so long. Maybe this is an opportunity to pray for the church, to pray for those who are on the fringe, to pray for the people whose faith is wavering, to go and to meet them where they're at so that we can bear one another's burdens. And maybe it's a time to develop our own interior faith life, to pour into our intentionality, to ask God to increase our desire for him and our fervor so that we can seek after him with a hungry heart. And so that when we can finally receive the sacraments again, that we won't let those sacramental graces lay dormant in our lives, but we'll allow them to come alive and be transformed by his grace. You know what isn't canceled? It's taking time out of your day and praying to God. Or calling up a friend on FaceTime and praying together for your intentions, or opening up the scriptures and reading God's word, or setting aside a time throughout your day where you can just sit in that sacred silence and allow God to speak to you, where you can go out and help those who are in need in whatever way that you can, to meet people where they're at. Though Mass is canceled, God's grace is not. Our faith isn't meant to be dormant, but to come alive with intentionality, desire, and fervor. And that's what we're called to do in this exceptional time of uncertainty that we're in right now. What are you doing to fuel your faith life in this time of uncertainty? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this episode, I would appreciate it if you would share with other people who might benefit from it as well. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and click the bell to be notified when I post new videos. Lastly, would you consider supporting my ministry at patreon.com/chrisbray so that I can continue to provide these faith resources to the people that need it the most. You get all the details at patreon.com/chrisbray. Thanks so much, and God bless you.